Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Q&A session for our fall screening series. My name is Camelia Shofani, and I'm the Senior Manager of Public Programs and Events here at the International Documentary Association. For our visually impaired attendees, I have curly dark hair, light skin, and dark eyes. I'm wearing a black and yellow t-shirt, and I'm wearing a chain. Thank you for joining us for a conversation around the documentary Nothing Compares, moderated by Addie Morfoot with director Kathryn Ferguson. For more information on our screening series lineup and Q&As, please visit documentary.org/screening-series. Before we get started, I would like to offer a brief land acknowledgement. We recognize the Gabrielino Tongva as the past, present, and future caretakers of the land, water, and cultural resources of the unceded territory of Los Angeles. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Addie Morfoot. I'm a contributing writer at Variety. I have light skin. I try to have blonde hair, and my eyes are brown. And I wanted to introduce Nothing Compares director Kathryn Ferguson.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Kathryn Ferguson. I'm a director. I've got dark hair, dark eyes, and light skin. Thank you.
Well, Kathryn, I'm so excited to speak with you today. I really enjoyed the film. So many questions to ask. I'm going to start with what I read about the origins of the film. And what I read was in 2011, you approached Sinéad O'Connor, her team, about using vocals for a master's graduation film you were making called Mother. And then that led, correct me if I'm wrong, to directing a music video for her in 2013. Is that how you got to know her?
Well, I mean, I felt like I'd known her for decades prior to that, as I grew up in Ireland and was, of course, a humongous fan growing up in the 80s and 90s when, Sinead was coming out. And yeah, it was really, as you say, in 2011, when I was doing my master's, I wanted to use her stems to deconstruct her music for this quite strange little experimental short that I was making for my master's project. It's called Mather, which is Irish for mother. And yeah, it was from then really that I was introduced to the team, and was delighted 2 years later when they came back and asked me to direct her first music video in 15 years for her track Fourth and Vine. So that really sowed the seed for this project. And yeah, we can talk a bit about that.
Well, and so in 2018, you approached her team again about making a documentary about her life and work. Why 2018? What was it that year that you thought this is a good year to make this project?
Well, to be honest, I'd been trying to get somebody to engage with me on it for at least 8 years, pretty much from when I worked with her. I really wanted to try and get this film up and running, but it was 2018 that I met the film's co-producers, Michael Malley and Eleanor Emtage, and co-writers. And when I met them, I think just the time, 2018, there was so much happening politically around the world. There was so much change, and I don't know, like we had, I suppose Trump was in power, we'd had the Me Too movement. There felt like this huge surge of female voices and revisionist histories. As well as that, in Ireland, we were gearing up towards our repeal the 8th abortion referendum, which thankfully was overturned. And we also had just had the equal marriage referendum. And both of these hugely systemic moments in our history, it felt absurd that Sinead's voice and acknowledgement of Sinead and everything that she'd done hadn't been looked at and mentioned before. So it felt quite urgent. And then on top of that, I then got to meet, as I mentioned, Michael and Ellie, who shared the same passion and vision for the project. And I finally had my team and people who were ready to jump in the deep end with me, because we started with no funding and no backers and had to start from scratch.
I mean, what was that like to reach out to her? I mean, I love the film and I think she is a trailblazer, but I'd still be intimidated to say, I want to make a film about you and this is why. I mean, were they long conversations? Was it a lot of convincing? Can you talk about the process of getting her to agree to do the film?
It was very much, as I said, through the team that I'd developed a relationship with over the 8 years prior, and I was expecting a very polite thank you, but no thanks when I arrived in eagerly with my one pager, wanting to share it. And I was amazed actually that they were up for it. And I think they could see why the story needed to be told now. I think there's been multiple attempts over the last 30 years, but I just think the moons aligned and that's why this was able to happen.
And so 2018, you approach her. Can you talk about the production? Like, when did production begin and where did you find financing and how did that happen?
Sure. Well, really, as I say, yeah, so it began in January 2018 and it was a very slow start. I had to convince her team and then we had to, start approaching our national funds to see if we could get development money and then production money. We began working with Northern Ireland Screen, first of all. They were first in, and then Screen Ireland, and then Doc Society at BFI. And then Field Division came in about 2 years in and were a hugely close partner throughout the whole process. They were fantastic, but really it was funding from the ground up and all through national funds. So there's a lot of pitching and pitching forums and all of that fun stuff. But really, it was also a very exciting process for me and my first feature. So it was a really interesting experience to live through that and see how it all worked.
Yeah, I mean, it must have been. And when she signed on to the film, was there any agreement that like she would have final cut or C cuts before you went to Sundance?
No, the real Sinead's involvement very much was through the fabulous interview that she gave us at the end of 2019. And because the film is a revisionist histories, it's not a biopic, it's not going back to, it's not birth to today by any means. We really just needed that interview. We never planned to follow around, to be an obstock in any way. It was, we wanted her telling her story in her own words, about this particular chapter that we were focusing in on. So aside from that, we just, most of the film, as you can see, is made up from archive, and the contemporary interview is the backbone of the narrative that then steers us through this story and in her own words.
Let me ask you about that interview. I thought it was really interesting that you decided not to put her on camera, that you can just hear her voice. Can you talk about that, why you made that decision?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I just feel Sinead's voice has been really reduced over the last 30 years, very actively so. And, as you see again in the film, the tabloid and, the approach to her is very reductive. And for me, it was of critical importance that her voice was the thing that jumped out the most in this film, that stood out as the key protagonist in this story. I wanted you to really hear her. So to really hear her, what I didn't want was lots of contemporary footage and anything that would distract from her voice telling her story. It was a key decision early on. And then we had planned to, even with our VO interviews with our contributors, we had planned always to do VO only because we wanted it to be very immersive and to keep you in that era, 1987 to 93. We wanted to keep you there. So we didn't want contemporary talking heads. And then, of course, COVID happened halfway through production, which, absolutely cemented that approach within the film. But we're really, really glad we did do that. We feel it's stronger for doing that.
And what about there are a few recreations, and when you're talking about her mother and the garden, and just can you was that something that you debated doing, or was that always part of the plan?
I mean, I suppose with any archive heavy film, really the film was, I think it's 70% archive, but the archive only really starts with Sinead in 1985. So we of course then had, nearly 20 years prior to that we needed to film visually. So it wasn't that I desperately wanted to do any recreations, but we kind of needed to be able to tell that early part of the story, because so much of this film is about looking at the cause and effect of why she did things and then why it happened and how it turned out. So we needed to create footage that would almost feel like archive itself, as opposed to something that jumped out. We just, it was, we were really actively shooting with different cameras and different formats to try and help create a tapestry that helped weave the whole thing together. But really, essentially, it was because the archive that we had began in 1985.
And so the focus of the film is her life between 1987 and 1993. I mean, I know Nothing Compares to You comes out in 1990. The Pope, I believe, happens, the ripping of the picture, in 92. But how did you decide on like those 5 years as opposed to those 2 years or 4 years?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I mean, we just felt like that there just so much happened in that period. It was the moment that she skyrocketed to fame. It's the point where she, decides to use her voice to really speak out, regardless of the consequences. And it's also the period where the backlash begins, really, in 1990. And reaches a peak in 1992, 93. So for us it was a very potent time. There's so much. I mean, Sinead's story is incredible, and I really hope in the future there'll be multiple docs that go into the wider story, but for us to be able to really hone in detail, and that was key to us, to be able to look at it thoroughly, we had to choose a time, and those 5 years just felt like the most potent, and the clearest example of where we could look at everything that happened, and then analyze it.
I'm always intrigued by archival footage, because there's a lot of times, especially with celebrities, so much of it. And I love the interview with the talk show host, I believe in Ireland, and her dad's in the audience. Just getting those great clips. I mean, can you talk about how much archival footage you were dealing with, and how many hours you were dealing with, and what you ended up using, what that process was like?
Yeah, I mean, it was an amazing deep dive. Because the film is 1987 to 93, there wasn't masses of archive. You'd have expected there to be a huge amount more. So we certainly used a lot of what's out there. We started working with an incredible archive producer, Joe Stones, way back in 2018. We were able to use our first little pot of development money to get her in. So by the time we started the edits in early 2021, we were able to, we already had a huge amount gathered. But where it got really exciting was when we started to meet the first-time contributors, who would say to us, "Oh God, there's this guy that I'm sure lives somewhere in America, and he's got a box under his bed, and there's a tape that I'm nearly positive he's got that hasn't been digitized. You've got to reach out to him." So we ended up going on this like wild journey of collating these incredible, never seen before nuggets. Like the wedding, you see a 15-year-old Sinead for the first time. Well, you hear her sing, and then you see a fleeting shot of her 15-year-old, which is just amazing. And the rehearsal space where she's got hair in 1985, I love that. And the club, the Lee Bowery club where she performs, all of these nuggets had never been seen before. So we were delighted to
Yeah.
find them.
Yeah, I forgot about the wedding. Yes. Well, I wanted to ask you about the Nothing Compares to You section of the film. There's so many stories about like Prince and her not getting along, and he wrote the song, and then I don't know if they're true or not. But I'm wondering, and then the video is astonishing. It's considered one of the best videos of all time, which you included. But how did you, was there a lot of back and forth in the edit on how to handle Nothing Compares to You? How much to go into and how much to leave out?
Well, I suppose for us, it was, we used specific videos to really try and deep dive into Sinead's history and her past, and why these songs were so emotionally important to her. So with, you definitely see it with Troy earlier on, and, she talks very clearly about the relationship she has with her mother there. And then we wanted to come back with Nothing Compares to revisit the relationship with her mother, which has obviously caused her great pain. She's spoken for decades about the famous tear appearing when she's actually thinking of her mother. So for us, of course, it was a critical scene that we needed to explore. We sadly weren't allowed to use the track, which was unfortunate, but created, a creative challenge for us as a filmmaking team on how we could still use the potency of the video. It's such an iconic video, as you say. And what we realized is you don't even actually necessarily need to hear it, because you can hear it in your head just watching it. It's that potent. So we worked out how we could try and keep our narrative whilst not using the song. But yeah, it was a big creative challenge of the film. But amazingly, I think that scene still translates to what we were hoping to say. Which is really, it was all about the sadness of regarding her mother.
Yeah. No, it's an incredible sequence, I thought. In the production notes, I read that one thing that was crucial to you is that this Nothing Compares isn't a regular music documentary. It's a portrait of a unique artist. I just want to ask about that. Why did you want to make sure that it wasn't considered a music doc?
Well, I suppose because we weren't doing the biopic, for me, it was utmost importance to really deep dive into socio-political themes behind the film, many of which are about Irish society, and, where someone like Sinead was spawned from, and therefore why her actions, i.e. Saturday Night Live, are so important. So I wanted to be able to look into the history of Ireland and its treatment of women, and she's one of of millions, and it was just, for me, it wasn't, the music is of course one of the key components, but it was really how she used both her songwriting, her voice, her activism. It's how she was able to drag herself out of a country like Ireland and to be who she became, but then how she used her power when she had it and who she spoke up for. I just thought was, it was incredible.
Yeah, it really, she was really 30 years ahead of her time, which the film makes clear. But can you talk about, we spoke earlier about a few of the screenings that you've had at various festivals, and I think one was in Ireland. And can you talk about what the reaction to that, the ripping of the Pope, was?
Yeah, it was emotional. But yeah, basically the film screened at Galway Film Fleadh in July, and that was maybe month 7 post Sundance, where it launched. And we'd seen the reaction across the world, which is luckily all been very positive. But it got back home, and it was the first time I was bringing this film back to my country and showing it to my people. And I was terrified. So I just didn't know, because it's such a confronting film for Irish people, I just didn't know how it would go down. So we were sitting in the Town Hall Theatre in Galway, and I was trying to read the room, as I always do in these in-person screenings. and it was all quite tense and quite quiet throughout the first 3/4 of the film. And we then get to this famous scene that you will have seen, where she rips up the picture of the Pope on Saturday Night Live, and the entire audience stood up and started cheering. And this was an audience that was made up. There were 18-year-olds, there were 98-year-olds. It was an amazing cross section of Irish society, and it was magical. It was such a window of insight into where the country has now come, you know, compared to where we were really not that long ago. And for that reason alone, I'm really excited for it to screen when it goes in general release, you know, in Ireland and the UK particularly. I'm very interested to see what the reaction's going to be. I think it's going to be galvanizing.
And I wasn't at Sundance for the screening, but what has American audiences, what have their reactions been?
Very positive, to be honest. Very positive. It's been interesting because obviously so much has happened in America since the film came out. And obviously many of the themes in the film are to do with what's happening in America right now. So I feel like, you know, certainly when it came out in January, you know, we had a very positive response after Sundance, but we've traveled all over now. And yeah, I mean, I just think 100% very positive and really behind her, but also I suppose sad. You know, it's bringing it, you know, given now how, you know, things are being dragged back. It's when you see a country like Ireland that was surely in the dark ages 30 years ago, it's now supposedly on the top 10 most liberal countries in the world. It's confronting, I think, in America to then look at what's happening politically in America right now. But I think what's fascinating with the film, and what I hope a key message is with throughout it, is that actually activism and collective activism can shift things. It can take an awful long time, but my God, it works, you know. And I think I'm just hoping there's a little iota of positivity for people watching it in America.
I think that's true, that people can make a change. I just wanted to ask one other thing about, you know, this is your first feature documentary. What lesson did you learn that you'll take to your next feature? And, you know, what was the most challenging part of getting this film made?
Whew. Big question. I don't think I'll ever do a film like this one again, because this was such a passion project, such a personal project. And I've just held it in such tight little fists, you know, for the entire 4 years of making it. I think I'll be able to go a lot more easy into future projects. This was one that just was so personal to me that I felt such a responsibility with, to make sure I was saying the right things with an artist that I admired so deeply, you know, from such a young age. So I think this is unique. What have I learned? Patience is a virtue. I think that is a key thing. You know, 4 years ago, you know, I think it would have amazed me to have seen what's happened with this film and how it's traveled and the journey it's had. It's been astounding, and I think that will give me huge confidence going forwards. That's, you know, the mountains seem humongous at the beginning, but you can actually climb them. I think that's fantastic. And what was the second part of your question? Sorry.
I was just gonna, you know, I mean, it seems like there might have been a lot of challenges just getting permission for one, but what do you consider one of the bigger challenges of getting the film made?
There's so many. I will write a book about them one day. There's so many challenges we had to overcome that I can't even talk about publicly, but there were a lot. But really, I think COVID was hard. It was hard. It happened bang in the middle, 2 years in, just when we were about to start our edits, and that was hard. Getting the funding was very hard as first-time filmmakers. Taking on a film like this with such a huge name was hard. Yeah, there's been a lot, but also, which I have said as well in the past, which I do find bizarre many ways for something that should have been so impossible in many ways. I just feel like this film really wanted to be out there, because whilst it was very difficult, so many things that should have been incredibly restrictive didn't happen, and doors just kept opening, and we were able to just keep putting one foot in front of the other until it was finished. But so yeah, it was, I will never forget it. I'll never forget it.
I bet you won't. Well, and just in terms of, I want everyone to know when it comes out. It's coming out theatrically
Yes.
before it goes on Showtime. Is
Yes.
it September 23rd? I can't remember the date.
Yes, 23rd in the US, and then Showtime on the 30th, and then premiering on the 2nd of October on Showtime, and then UK Ireland full theatrical release on the 7th of October.
Wow. Okay.
So
Well,
eyes on it, which is exciting. Terrifying.
yeah, it's definitely exciting. Well, congratulations on everything. I'm really excited for the world to see this film and see a different side of Sinead O'Connor. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.